Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Pizza Time Chronicles. We're here with another episode with my very good friend Marquise. How are you doing today?
We alive, we living. I was a little spacey today, but I'm good. I'm just feeling good at this point. I got a little bit more life into me, so I appreciate it.
Oh, that's good. Marquise, let the people know who you are.
Yeah. So it's your boy Marquise, aka This American Negro, aka One Fourth of Dear Redding. This just a regular black person. Marquise Davon. Don't call me Mark. That's not my nickname. Don't like that at
Don't,
all. But
don't.
yeah, I'm a black male educator, social media strategist, activist, and yeah, just out here, human being.
And listen, Marquise, I'm so honored to have you on my show today. You have such a powerful voice. You have a powerful mind. You're a very influential figure in our community. And, today's episode is very important. And I wanted to bring you on because today we're going to be talking about the movement that has been going across the nation. And ladies and gentlemen, I say this is not a trend. This is a movement that has been going on for very long. We're going to be talking about Black Lives Matter. And I think this is important. I wanted to have it on you on this show. So are you ready for the questions?
I am ready.
So, Marquise, what does Black Lives Matter mean to you?
To me, it is an acknowledgement, it's accountability, and it's also just a movement to push people to really think about how they've kind of been indoctrinated in our hometown, just in general in America, in an anti-Black world. So it's really just a call to action for people to really start acknowledging, like, oh, obviously all lives matter, but how does Black Lives Matter really? Why is this having to need to be a phrase? So it's really more for me. It's like a space where you say Black Lives Matter, you're like, hold up, shouldn't they? But then you realize there's so many things in this world that tell us that our lives don't matter. So whether that's a person, a system, anti-Blackness, wherever that shows up. So socially, economically, and politically, we see these things shift in so many different ways. So Black Lives Matter is just an acknowledgement and then moves to accountability, which then moves to reform for me.
And that's a great answer. And obviously, I talked about it not being a trend because usually when these things hit social media and they die out, people just stop. And it can be frustrating. It is
Right.
frustrating because you want people to keep advocating, you want people to keep chasing reform like you talk about. Talk about your personal opinion with seeing this as a trend and it dying out.
I think we've seen this before. We saw this with Rodney King. We see
Hmm.
this with the Black Panther movement. We saw this with the Civil Rights movement. We just see new iterations of it every day as this system becomes more designed and refined in terms of what this is. Nobody's outright calling us nigg. Well, I mean, just kidding. Some people are still calling us niggers. People are still getting lynched, but we're also seeing like slavery just evolved into mass incarceration. So now we have to look at the intricacies of structural racism rather than the overt racism, the covert racism, stuff like that. So for me, I think I I worry because even just from a capitalist standpoint, people are starting to market and understand like, oh, saying Black Lives Matter will actually promote my bottom dollar. And so people are thinking like, oh, this is suddenly a trend or this should be like something that our business should be throwing out there. But some of them aren't like they're not doing structural change, but they're doing the bare minimum. So this idea of it being a trend, I think it's worrisome, but I think it's also combined with the fact that we live in a social media age too. We see hashtags happen all the time. We see content be digested at such a rapid pace. And so when we do have this conversation about it being co-opted as being a trend, I think that just diminishes this very real history in America of Black people actually fighting for their liberation and Black people demanding to be seen, to be acknowledged, to have their community healed and invested in once again. So I think I worry about becoming a trend because most people, if this is their first introduction into what liberation looks like for Black folk, but also what this movement looks like, I worry that they think doing the bare minimum of putting up a black square is actually inciting actual change. You can do so much awareness, but what are you
Right.
actually doing to decolonize your mind? What are you doing to actually unlearn your anti-blackness? What are you doing to transform a system that disenfranchises poor Black folk on a regular basis?
And that's correct. I mean, we had Blackout Tuesday, which is probably the most recent thing from social media.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people did partake in that. They posted a black square in their profile picture, and there's a lot of there's a lot of controversy behind it because people were doing it and they
Right.
felt, it was an empowering thing. But what action was to follow that?
Right.
And I think with protests as well, it's great to go to protest. But the thing is, some people were doing it for clout. If we're being real, some people were doing it so that they were not judged after.
Yep.
And it was the actions that were to follow. That's what people were questioning, and that's where a lot of this debate happened. A lot of arguments happened because they're like, "Oh, I already did something," but it's like, okay, but we have to continue, pushing. And as you're gonna say, Marquise,
Yeah, no, I just think it's like a space of privilege that some of these people move from as well, because they can hop onto this. And also knowing like we're in the middle of COVID. So if people can get outside, they're going to try and go outside. So it's understanding like who are the detractors from the movement, but who are people who do this work every day. I don't have the privilege of not being able to do this work because I'm very Black. You can't see. That's part of my livelihood. And for me, just even as a role of an educator, I can't tell my students talk on a podcast that's centered in Blackness, and I'm essentially like mentoring and teaching Black kids, but also not walk my talk, but also not do the work to do this, but also not empower them to be able to have their own agency. So for me, it's really like a consistent work. And I think about it as like, it's hygiene, it's hygienic to really think about how are you unlearning these things. It's a work in progress. You should be brushing your teeth every day. You should shower every day, or at least every other day for some folk out there. But really kind of just understanding.
Sorry.
I know. But I think it's like a consistent work in progress. So just to say, oh, this is completely gone from my mind. No, this is something you have to work at every single day to maintain that fresh breath. So your fresh breath should be Black Lives Matter and not smell like white supremacy.
Right. Those shelves are pretty stocked for the soap and toothpaste. That's all I'm saying. We lost toilet paper, but anyway, let's not get petty. Anyway, so, we talked a lot. I did mention arguing and debating. Marquise, I know you've been really active on Facebook. We're going to be honest. Facebook's been really active, and, with our local officials everywhere, I think it's important that we're holding them accountable.
Yeah.
And the thing is, they want to be comfortable because we're in election season, but the thing is, they shouldn't be. They should be able to answer these hard questions and get into these healthy debates. And my question to you is it because they don't want to be educated, or is it because they're tired of it and they just want to continue doing pushing their agenda?
I think there is a specific agenda to keep Reading poor, essentially. I think there is a space where people profit off of this because there's a lot of nonprofits in the city. I think it is also this lack of a radical imagination of what the city of Reading could be. We talk about this could be the best thing in the world. We want to keep young people here. We want to know, like, what do you need? We want to know all of these things. How do we decrease violence? How do we do all these things in the community and make it a safer space, right? We hear these questions all the time. So we are giving solutions, but it's a weird pushback when people are not doing what they need to do. Multiple times we talk about increased policing does not actually decrease violence and decrease crime in the community. That actually increases it because there's a certain level of social anxiety. There's this predisposition that Black and brown people have to the police because of the very violent history that police presence have in low-income Black and brown communities. Specifically looking at Reading, which we also have to include, like, there's a huge undocumented population inside of Reading too. So it's very difficult for us to trust into a system that is going to either incarcerate us or potentially deport us, right? And so for me, Reading has like this weird thing of like, oh, don't say this person's name out loud. It's almost like a Voldemort effect, essentially, of just like, don't say their name, because if you say their name, then it's going to be an issue. But in reality, it took us to almost publicly kind of shame our public administration for not speaking up for George Floyd. It took us to say Eddie Moran. It took us to say Manny Guzman. It took us to say City Council. Why haven't you put out a statement to comfort the pain that Black people are exhibiting right now? Why hasn't the bare minimum been done? And even when it was done, it was very difficult for Eddie Moran to even name Black people specifically, right? So if you look at his messaging, he's wearing a Lonnie Walker shirt, but he names George Floyd, but not the collective pain of everybody. He names George Floyd's family, but not the collective pain and collective outrage of everybody, right? So we can do the nitpicky thing, but it's very much so understanding we have to push them on their politics. We have to push them on their beliefs. We have to push them on their systems, because some of these people that are in these positions of power, like I say it all the time. I've been saying this since Eddie interviewed on Dear Redding, but Eddie is a product of the police during the rise of the war on drugs in New York. So for us to even be having these calls of defunding the police and reallocating our funds and knowing what this new radical imagination looks like, we got to understand his politics are going to be very much so indoctrinated with Blue Lives Matter, right? And so we have to understand, like, how do we push somebody whose very existence and background is so ingrained and intertwined with this? And so I think it's a very hard thing, because a lot of people in the city of Reading don't understand when you get somebody in there who's an elected official, and to have somebody in there who looks like us, right, who's supposed to be of the people, correct, but also their politics don't reflect that. I always get bothered by the fact that a lot of people always say, well, representation matters. All right, but their representation can not only matter on a skin deep level. Their representation should also reflect those beliefs that Black people should matter. Their beliefs should reflect that we should empower our youth to be able to hold these people accountable. So for right now, they're looking at me when I do this, and a lot of words that they're continuing to use is aggressive, divisive, lazy. Why are you attacking people? Why are you always agitating people? Oh, this is not actual real change. So it's really understanding, especially for them to have to unpack their anti-Blackness and why they think I'm being, they're essentially reducing me down to an angry Black man, right? And so it's understanding these languages that they're using, and it's a very coded language that the city of Reading is so used to doing, they don't even realize that they're doing it, because they'll now say, oh, well, if I critique you, then it's racist or it's anti-Black. No, but your statements that you use to describe me and what I did are very much so indoctrinated and very anti-Black in what you're saying. Yes. What you're doing is making it seem like I'm only working off of emotion, which now gaslights me, because I actually have done the research on critical race theory. I've done the research on past policy. I know what Black history looks like, and we've watched this play out more and more again. So because of you no longer treating the fact that we have lack of resources in the community, you're not treating the fact that we live in a food desert. You're not treating the fact that not a lot of people have the opportunity for jobs, and there's very real exploitation happening. The mushrooms, that's exploitation right then and there, right? We all know that this exists. We all smell the mushrooms in our community, right? And so it's like, for you to not even understand, we know what the issue is, but now that you're in a position of power to actually hold these people accountable, you're actually in a position of power as a person of color to do this. It now makes me question, like, what is your actual agenda? And do you actually want to be for the community? Because if you were for the community, you would take funds away from the people that actually harm the community and invest in the people on the very ground level. So for me, I think these debates, it's very interesting, because you see this kind of combativeness happen, but then you also see that some people are just exposing themselves and realizing, like, oh, well, him asking for a little bit of accountability, that might be doing too much, you know? So I just think it's very interesting when you challenge people because they think it's a personal attack on their character, versus like, no, I like Eddie the person, I like Manny the person, Nate the person, the other one, but when they are in position, but those who are in positions of power and are actually elected officials in these positions, that is when you're entering a new space of being allowed to be critiqued, because you actually have the very power to enfranchise our entire community, but you choose to keep it down rather than elevate it, and then get some photo ops with some cops rather than actually giving resources for the community to have a beautiful community, quote unquote.
Right. And you know, the thing is, there's times to be friendly. You know, there's times that we're friends and we can have a good time, and that's what our city's about. You know, we definitely have gotten past that phase there. You know what? We got to be together because we got to unite. There's a lot of stereotypes. There's a lot of people who are already against us that are not from the city. But there's a time, you know, and there's a time that we have to say, okay, you're in this position. You have this power. You have this influence. We need you to represent us now. And we both know Reading is majorly Latino.
Mm-hmm.
Major, it's 80% Hispanic.
Right.
And
Black people represent the 8%. Like,
right. It's like you and me both know where we're from, where we went to college. Kutztown
mm-hmm.
University. You were the minority. And look how much advocacy we had to push. We worked together. And I don't think it should be any different when you're coming to a city like Reading. And we
No.
should be working together. We should be working together and creating these things because we know that we're present. We're here and we're hearing you. And,
Right.
the lack of the silence, I wouldn't say lack of silence, the silence, it's concerning. And the thing is, it's like, yeah, as you're saying.
No, go ahead.
And as you were saying, we respect these people. We know these people on a personal level. They're great people. We know where their
Right, we see
hearts
them at Mikasa Sukasa every day.
right.
Like,
we know where their heart's at. We know it. But we just need them to act.
mm-hmm.
That's all we're saying. And it doesn't come out as that we're attacking them and that I hate that word lazy because you're not lazy. Dear Reading is not lazy. The American Negro is not lazy. They're doing what needs to be done. And, that's just my 2 cents. I want to.
I appreciate that too. Because it's really just understanding too. It's just like, yo, when you were going up for this role, we had to rally behind you, even though we questioned so much. Because remember, it was Anna Rose or Eddie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's like a very interesting space to be in because I think we would have gotten the same kind of mayor. Both, in my mind, they were on 2 sides of the same coin. But we just had to pick, like, all right, do we want like somebody who's from the outside doing this and a white person, or do we want a Latino person to get into this space as well? But both have backgrounds in law enforcement. Both are charismatic, essentially. But we were able to kind of pull that narrative, like, oh, you're an outsider, though. You're a little white. Don't trust you, right? But I think it is also like interesting when we talk about what does this look like for us to work together, right? And I think it was like very interesting because on Twitter about a month ago now, there was this conversation of what the Black girls' experience was like growing up in the city of Reading. And a lot of Black women today were talking about it was absolutely trash for them to do this. It was trash for them to have to go through it because they've experienced anti-Blackness not only from other Black men, but also other people of color. Any non-Black person, they were criminalized in the school system. They thought they were always talking back or had an attitude. So it was interesting when this all first started happening because we can see it from a childhood's perspective, but now we are also seeing this in a larger context of the uprisings that are happening across the nation. And then this weird moment where I think because we're a majority minority town, like it's majority Latino, it's very weird for people to have to recognize, like, oh, a lot of Hispanics that were on Twitter and stuff, they were just like, well, why didn't you say something? Or why is not this? Or why is not? And everybody's just like, well, now we all know, right?
Right.
And so I think it's like a weird moment of understanding that as a person of color, as Black men, we committed a very particular harm to the people that we call neighbors. And it's hard for us to have to admit, like, oh, I did this bad thing. And now how do I move on from acknowledging that I did this bad thing to make it better, right? And I think that idea even goes into local government now, because now it's this weird moment where people are publicly talking about, no, the cops are actually doing harm to our community, but these are cops. Some of these cops we say are our neighbors, and then the other cops, they're coming from out of the city. So they already have this predisposition of what Reading is. Because even when I went to college, everybody's like, oh, you went to Reading? Like the city of Reading? Like inside the city, Reading High?
Right.
And they were just like, I'm surprised you survived. But that knowing that mindset came from people that were my age, 18 at the time, 19 at the time, that's that same thing that people in Wilson think about us. That's what the cops outside of the city think about us. So we have to understand that this is a very anti-Black, anti-brown, anti-poverty kind of mindset that people are coming into the city with. So they're already criminalizing us. They already assume before they find out if I have a 4-year degree, I have a professional job, I'm an educator, before they get all these qualifications of who I am, they're already coming in here and thinking, You might be dangerous. You might be a little nigga over here. You might do this over here, right? And so it's really understanding like the police and how they have participated in a system that gives them audacity to hurt our people. The police are not, they're a full system. Lately, what we've been seeing in the news is like, oh, well, we need cops. And seeing like the Columbus statue, we need cops to make sure this is protected. We need cops for these fireworks. We need cops for these things. But how do we need these cops if a lot of these crimes that are happening are nonviolent? Why do we need these cops if a lot of these crimes that are happening could be rectified if we had a mental health specialist come into these spaces? Or if you just give people food? If your first question is, what do you need? What happens when you reframe it and start moving that way? So for right now, I actually am very skeptical of Eddie's administration because one, not only is it all men, which is like an issue in itself, except for one woman, it's also understanding that blood will be on his hands if he does not start moving into policy that restores a community, that invests in the community, that provides resources for this. So I think it is like a very interesting moment because he has to now admit this participation and this harm that he's committed to the people that he says he wants to protect, right? And that's very hard for somebody as lovable as Eddie. This is somebody that's hard for somebody who wants to be loved by everybody, who wants to be the man of the people, who wants to uphold this mantle of being the first Latino mayor in the city of Reading, right? It's very hard. And so people get very defensive of this because when you have the first, you want to maintain this and make sure you have this squeaky clean kind of thing. But it's okay for me. If I did not care about the city of Reading, if I did not care about Eddie, if I did not care about this administration, I would not be fighting as hard as it is. I would not be pushing them to think like, oh, is this anti-Black? Are we moving in an anti-racist way? Are we moving in a way that invests in community? But that's the part of Reading where I'm realizing they either do not have the range in these particular topics, especially for people who are in power, but also understanding, does Eddie's camp actually challenge him? I wonder if, as much as Manny posts, Manny Guzman, I bangs with Manny. Now, did I cuss him out on Twitter? Absolutely. Did I cuss Nate out on Twitter? I did. Did I cuss Juan out on Twitter? I did. Okay. Yes. But I think it is also just from a space of really understanding, like, I don't know if they are genuinely challenging Eddie because they want to maintain this very specific title that's happened. But then also, are they letting their friendship really cloud progress? Are they letting their friendship cloud the demands of the people? Because now people think I'm just doing this thing to attack Eddie every single day. But it's just reminding you, like, the same way we say Breonna Taylor, arrest Breonna Taylor's murderers, the same way we say Black Lives Matter every day. Like, these protests aren't stopping. This is 30 consecutive days of New York protesting. There are plenty of cities that are doing this that have a significantly larger Black population, but there's this weird moment in Reading, PA, where we tend to divorce what's going on in the rest of the world and think we're not doing the exact same thing. That's the issue.
Yes, and you know what you're saying is completely true. You know, I respect the men that you named. You know, you see me with them. You know, I would say we're good friends.
I got drinks with half of them.
Yeah, exactly. You know, but like you said, we care. You care. You know, that's why you're fighting as hard as you're fighting, because you want the best, especially for the Black community. It's like me, how I advocate for the Latino community and the youth. I want the best for them.
Right.
And, you know, it's important that we have this conversation because we're both young. And as much as Reading, Pennsylvania claims they want the youth to get involved, this is the important conversation we got to have. This is the dialogue that we got to have. We got to work together. And I really wanted to make this episode with you because, you know, the city of Reading, we're united when we want to be publicized as we're united. But when we go behind the scenes, you know, I don't want to use the word divided anymore. I want to say that we have a lot of differences that we have to address. And for us to move forward, in order for us to see this positive change that we don't think we're able to accomplish, but we know we can. We got to see past these differences and continue to create this dialogue. Because when you consider calling out someone by name as an attack, that's not an attack. No, someone can call me out right now. Gio, how come you felt this way? It's got to explain yourself. Have that conversation.
Right.
It's not an attack. It's not. And I mean, we all saw it well, some of us saw it on Twitter. I mean, some of us are just out there. Someone, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, but the thing is, at the end of the day, we got to say that we care and that we want the best for our city. And
Yeah.
I really encourage everybody else that's watching this episode today, bring this conversation to your city. It's not only happening in Reading, it's happening all over this nation. And it's important that we have these conversations and show that we are united, or some of us are united anyway, that we're
Right.
united and that we want change.
And I
We
think,
care. Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
And I just want to say that, however you take this podcast after this, take it as it is. But at the end of the day, we care and we really want change to happen.
Yeah, because I think we're also seeing like a very wonderful thing too, is
Yes.
it's been really cool in a weird way. Like, not,
Yeah.
it sucks that these are the circumstances, but the amount of young Black kids, the amount of young brown kids that have just been reaching out and just like, Marquise, thank you, right? I don't know what to do, and then there's some of the bittersweet stuff and the heartbreaking stuff too. Is like, Marquise, I want to be part of this, but they think I'm a thug. Like, that's an issue for me, right? I don't want anybody to think just because I have a 4-year degree and I have a specific platform that their voice doesn't matter, right?
Correct.
Because I'm not living inside the city of Reading currently. So it's like there's this distancing, but I'm a fight and ride for my people because they still bring me to these very particular tables. And all I want to do is making sure that the same way you give me my respect because I'm a qualified Negro for y'all is also the same way y'all should be giving the people on the stoop, the same kind of respect. You should be bringing them into these spaces because if anything, I have a certain level of privilege where I get to move in a very particular way that other people don't have the opportunity to do so because, oh, well, that person's a thug, or this person's an ex-felon, or they're formerly incarcerated, or they're this, right? We don't want to give them that space, right? Because we think of them in a very particular way, and we criminalize them ourselves. So I just want them to make sure, and this administration to make sure that you have more people represented. Like I alluded to it earlier, but the fact that Eddie Moran's camp only has one woman on it is an issue. The fact that we need to have Black women part of this conversation. We need to have Hispanic women part of this conversation. We need to have queer people part of this conversation because those are very nuanced experiences. So if you're not moving from the lens where like, hey, I think we should be able to move along with this policy, but you don't realize how this policy can negatively impact queer people or women, you're not being challenged because now you have these blinders on because you're not doing the work every day to understand how do your privileges manifest, but then how does that privilege and your your biases, how do those manifest into policy as well? And is it sustainable stuff too? A lot of people in Reading, in my mind, want a lot of credit, but they don't want the actual change. They want to say they did this thing, but when it comes to seeing it through, we don't see anything happening. There's so many vacancies in city council for these different boards and stuff, but there's no access to them for one, which is probably by design. People don't talk about them. They're saying, hey, we want y'all on this, but maybe not you, right? Eddie's gathered a sea of Black people 2 times now. The first time had a decent amount of people, right? But it's also like the second time, it's invite only. So by having that invite only, you're already cutting off a significant amount of people. I didn't even see Brad be part of these meetings, right? And Brad's I consider one of the OGs of Reading. He's in the streets. He's not in these, actually, yeah, he's invited to a lot of these tables. But a lot of people see Brad, and I'm just like, yo, he's been saying a lot of this stuff from the get. Like, me right now would not exist if it wasn't for Brad when I was growing up. Because I saw him doing the hip hop summit. I saw him curating these events. I saw him building a very particular culture. I saw him speaking out. And now me as an adult, I have such a renewed appreciation for him because he's been doing the same things that I've been doing today. He's been having these conversations. He's tapped in with the community, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's really just that moment of understanding, like, this is nothing new in terms of a fight. This is nothing new in terms of anti-Blackness in the city of Reading. This is nothing new in terms of challenging people, but also realizing that there's this weird energy in the city of Reading of tokenizing people, but never actually putting them in spaces where change can happen, because we tend to have to do this on a very grassroots level. We do this on the ground most times, but now when we have somebody who can do this change, I question it, how much they actually want change, or if they just wanted that title of being the first Latino mayor. Right?
Straight like that. Straight like that.
Yeah,
straight
man.
like that. I mean, you take it as you want it. You know, that's why I created this open dialogue. This is why I created this podcast, so that we can have these conversations that are important. And like we said, I think if you're going to take anything from this podcast today, this episode, just know that we respect everyone that he named today, but we just want the best for our city. We're ready practically. Marquise is ready at the point that he's screaming out. You know, we don't want to get.
They really pushed me to the point. I said,
right.
"Wow, I feel angry."
Right. We want change. We want to work with you. But if you're gonna exclude us out, you know, is like, I think that's a major reason why some people leave. You know, they don't have that voice. They don't have a reason to stay. You know, and I think it's just gonna keep going and going and going until this change happens. And you know. But Marquise, that's to lighten up the mood a little bit. I know people are probably watching this.
They're like, huh.
They're going in.
They said, damn, that was a lie.
Yeah, so, you know, this is going to be probably released on Wednesday. But anyway, my question to you is, knowing this podcast, what is your favorite pizza, and where is that pizza from?
Oh, that was a good one. Favorite pizza is definitely, like, give me a good bacon pizza. And I know I might get some flack for this, but like Rockies back in the day, that was my joint. Like, it was more of an emotional connection to Rockies. But me and my friends used to sit in Rockies for about 6 hours, just talking and eating, and just, it was my place of comfort. So Rockies, bacon pizza was definitely my jam.
And there you have it, everybody. Thank you so much for watching this episode. And thank you so much. This is Marquise Richards. I'm Gio. Well, G-Slice on this podcast. And everybody, enjoy yourself. Just know we love you. We care about you. Until next time.
All right. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome.